My name is Isabella, and I am 20 years old. Last Christmas changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. What started as accidentally overhearing a phone conversation turned into discovering the most elaborate betrayal orchestrated by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They planned to publicly humiliate me at our annual Christmas gathering, thinking I would never find out. But when I walked into that family room 3 days later, watching their faces crumble as they opened my carefully chosen gift, I realized sometimes the sweetest revenge comes wrapped in holiday paper. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button if you are ready for some serious Christmas karma. Subscribe because, trust me, this story has twists that will make your own family drama look like a Hallmark movie. Now let me take you back to where this all began. 3 weeks before Christmas, I was staying at my childhood home to help my mother prepare for our traditional family gathering. Every year, our extended family descended upon the old Victorian house where I grew up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and various family friends who had become honorary relatives over the decades. It was supposed to be magical, the kind of Norman Rockwell scene that people dream about during the holidays. I had been looking forward to this Christmas more than usual because I had finally gotten my life together. After years of struggling through graduate school, working multiple jobs, and living in a cramped studio apartment, I had landed my dream position as a museum curator at a prestigious art institution. For the first time in my adult life, I felt proud of my accomplishments and excited to share them with my family. That Tuesday evening, I was upstairs in my old bedroom, organizing the gifts I had carefully selected for everyone, when I heard my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I had left it charging downstairs and could hear it ringing through the old house's thin walls. As I headed down to retrieve it, I heard my mother's voice coming from the kitchen, speaking in the hushed, conspiratorial tone she used when she was sharing gossip. "She still has no idea we know about the loan," my mother was saying into her phone. I froze on the staircase, immediately understanding she was talking about me. My heart began racing as I pressed myself against the wall, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. 6 months earlier, I had borrowed $5,000 from my grandmother's emergency fund to cover a security deposit for a better apartment. It was supposed to be temporary. I had planned to pay it back within 2 months once my new job started. But unexpected medical bills from a minor surgery had delayed my repayment timeline. I had been too embarrassed to explain the situation and had been quietly paying it back in smaller increments, thinking no one would notice until I could replace the full amount. Apparently, I was wrong. Carol found the bank statements when she was helping Mother organize her papers last month. My mother continued. "Can you believe the nerve? Taking money from a 90-year-old woman who trusted her completely." My legs felt weak. Carol was my aunt, my grandmother's primary caregiver, and someone I had always considered a close friend. She had been the one who suggested I borrow the money in the first place, assuring me that Grandma Rose would want to help me get settled in my new career. "We decided it would be perfect timing to address it at Christmas dinner," my mother went on, "with everyone there as witnesses. Carol is going to announce it right before dessert, make a big speech about family, trust, and responsibility. Isabella thinks she is so smart with her fancy new job, but she needs to learn that stealing from family has consequences." The word stealing hit me like a physical blow. I had been planning to announce my promotion to senior curator at dinner, an achievement I had worked toward for 5 years. Instead, they were planning to publicly shame me for something I had every intention of making right. But it got worse. "Stephen is bringing copies of the bank statements to pass around," my mother continued, referring to my cousin who worked at the bank. "And David is going to film the whole thing for evidence, in case we need to take legal action later." I sank down onto the stairs, feeling sick. David was my brother, someone I had supported through his own financial struggles just 2 years ago when he was going through his messy divorce. The idea that he would film my humiliation felt like the ultimate betrayal. "The best part is that we are going to do it right after she gives her little speech about her new job," my mother laughed. Take her down a peg when she is feeling all high and mighty. Maybe it will teach her some humility. I listened for another 10 minutes as my mother detailed their plan with obvious glee. They had discussed it in multiple family meetings that I was excluded from. They had assigned roles to different family members. My uncle was going to demand immediate full repayment. My cousins were going to share stories about their own financial responsibility to contrast with my theft. Even some family friends had been briefed on the situation and were prepared to express their disappointment. The worst part was realizing that this was not about the money at all. They were genuinely excited about the opportunity to publicly humiliate me. My mother's tone carried a satisfaction that made my stomach turn. This was about resentment that had been building for years, resentment about my education, my career ambitions, my decision to live in the city instead of staying in our small town. As I sat there on the stairs, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they were being rapidly replaced by something colder and more calculating. They wanted to play games with public humiliation. They wanted to turn Christmas dinner into a performance designed to tear me down in front of everyone I cared about? Fine. I could play that game too. I spent the rest of that night lying awake, my mind racing through possibilities. By morning, I had the foundation of a plan that would turn their Christmas ambush into something they would never forget. If they wanted drama at Christmas dinner, I was going to give them drama they would be talking about for years. The next morning, I acted completely normal. I helped my mother prep food, chatted with relatives as they called to confirm attendance, and even asked innocent questions about the seating arrangements and dinner timeline. All the while, I was gathering intelligence and refining my strategy. They had no idea that their secret weapon, the element of surprise, was now mine. The next 48 hours passed in a strange haze of cold calculation and emotional numbness. I moved through my normal routine, helping with Christmas preparations, shopping for last-minute items, wrapping gifts, but internally, I was operating on a completely different level. Every interaction with my family members felt like I was watching them through glass, observing their behavior with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. My mother kept glancing at me with barely concealed anticipation, clearly relishing her secret knowledge. My brother David called twice under the pretense of confirming what time to arrive, but I could hear the guilt in his voice. When my Aunt Carol stopped by to check on Christmas dinner preparations, she could barely maintain eye contact while asking pointed questions about my finances and whether I was managing okay with my new job expenses. The most revealing moment came when my cousin Stephen texted me asking if I was excited about Christmas dinner this year, followed by a series of laughing emoji. These people were not just planning to humiliate me, they were actively enjoying the anticipation of it. That realization crystallized something important. This was not about teaching me a lesson or addressing a legitimate concern about the loan. This was about power, resentment, and the particular brand of cruelty that can only exist within families who know exactly which buttons to push to cause maximum damage. I started researching. I spent hours on my laptop, diving deep into public records, social media histories, and financial databases that my museum work had given me access to. If they wanted to air dirty laundry in public, I was going to make sure I had a complete wardrobe to choose from. What I discovered was fascinating. Stephen, who was planning to distribute copies of bank statements showing my temporary loan, had apparently been skimming money from the church collection plate for months. His position as volunteer treasurer had given him access to cash donations, and careful examination of the church's online financial reports showed consistent discrepancies that aligned perfectly with his personal spending patterns on social media. My Uncle Robert, who was designated to lecture me about financial responsibility, had secretly declared bankruptcy 8 months ago while hiding assets in his wife's name. The public records were all there, filed in the county courthouse, showing a complex web of debt consolidation and asset transfers that painted a picture of financial deception far more sophisticated than my straightforward family loan. Carol, my aunt who had discovered my grandmother's bank statements, had been systematically borrowing items from my grandmother's house for years. A careful review of family photos from previous gatherings showed furniture, artwork, and jewelry gradually disappearing from Grandma Rose's house and appearing in Carol's home. She had been taking advantage of my grandmother's increasing forgetfulness to essentially rob her blind. But the most shocking discovery involved my own mother. Deep in the county recorder's office database, I found documentation showing that my mother had taken out a second mortgage on the family home without telling my father. The loan, for $75,000, had been approved 6 months ago. According to the paperwork, the money was supposed to be used for home improvements and debt consolidation, but looking at my parents' lifestyle and spending habits, it was clear the money had gone somewhere else entirely. Further investigation revealed that my mother had been funding a secret investment scheme run by one of her high school friends, a woman who had convinced several local families to invest in a guaranteed return real estate venture that had all the hallmarks of a classic pyramid scheme. My mother had invested not only her own money, but had encouraged several elderly relatives to contribute their savings as well. The beautiful irony was not lost on me. While planning to publicly shame me for borrowing $5,000 from my grandmother with every intention of paying it back, my mother had secretly mortgaged the family home and convinced vulnerable relatives to invest their life savings in what was obviously a scam. As I compiled this information, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. This was not about revenge anymore, it was about justice. These people had built their entire attack on moral superiority they did not possess. They were planning to destroy my reputation while hiding secrets that made my situation look completely insignificant by comparison. I began planning my Christmas gift. The key was presentation. I could not simply show up and start making accusations that would make me look desperate and vindictive. Instead, I needed to create a moment that would expose their hypocrisy in a way that was undeniable and public, using their own planned humiliation as the perfect backdrop. I designed a custom photo book, the kind of high-quality memory album that families often exchange during holidays. The cover was beautiful, elegant typography reading, "Our family's financial journey, a year of truth and transparency." To anyone glancing at it, it would look like a thoughtful, sentimental gift celebrating family bonds and shared experiences. The contents told a different story. Page by page, the book documented every financial irregularity, every hidden transaction, every act of actual theft and deception that I had uncovered. Bank statements, public records, photographic evidence, and timeline comparisons were arranged in a clean, professional layout that made the information impossible to dismiss or deny. Each family member got their own dedicated section, complete with documentation and cross-references. The church embezzlement. The hidden bankruptcy. The systematic theft from my grandmother. The secret mortgage and investment scheme. Everything was presented with museum-quality research standards and formatted to be absolutely clear and undeniable. The final section addressed my own loan situation, including my complete repayment plan and documentation showing that I had been making consistent payments ahead of schedule. Compared to the thousands of dollars in actual theft and fraud committed by my accusers, my temporary family loan looked exactly like what it was, a minor financial arrangement between people who were supposed to trust and support each other. I had copies printed at a professional print shop, bound in beautiful hardcover format. To anyone observing, it would look like I had spent considerable time and money creating a heartfelt family gift. The night before Christmas dinner, I carefully wrapped the photo books in elegant paper and placed them under the tree with the other family gifts. Each family member who was part of the planned ambush would receive their own personalized copy. As I placed the last wrapped book under the tree, I felt something I had not experienced in days: genuine excitement about Christmas dinner. They wanted to play games with public humiliation and family shame? Perfect. I was about to show them what a real power move looked like. Christmas Eve arrived with the kind of perfect winter weather that makes everything look like a greeting card. Snow had fallen overnight, covering the old Victorian house in pristine white, and the smell of my mother's traditional Christmas cookies filled the air. Under normal circumstances, it would have been magical. Instead, It felt like the calm before a hurricane. I woke up early and spent extra time getting ready, choosing my outfit carefully. I wanted to look successful and confident, not defensive or desperate. I selected a deep emerald dress that I had bought specifically for my work Christmas party, paired with the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me for my college graduation. The irony of wearing her gift while planning to expose the people who had stolen from her was not lost on me. Throughout the morning, family members began arriving in waves. Each entrance felt like watching actors take their positions for a performance they did not know I had already seen the script for. My Aunt Carol swept in with excessive cheerfulness, immediately fussing over my grandmother and making pointed comments about family loyalty and taking care of our elders. My Uncle Robert arrived with his wife, both of them carrying expensive wine and making jokes about living within our means that they clearly thought were hilarious. Stephen showed up with a manila folder tucked under his arm, obviously containing the bank statements he planned to distribute during their planned ambush. He kept patting the folder and shooting meaningful looks at the other conspirators. David arrived with his new girlfriend, making a show of setting up his phone in various locations around the dining room, claiming he wanted to capture some great family memories. The most surreal part was watching them all interact with me. They were trying so hard to act natural while clearly savoring their secret knowledge that their behavior had taken on an almost cartoonish quality. Every conversation felt loaded with double meanings and barely suppressed excitement about what they had planned. "Isabella, you must be so excited to tell everyone about your new job," my mother said during lunch preparation, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I am sure everyone would love to hear about how things are going for you." "Oh, I have quite a bit to share," I replied calmly, arranging dinner rolls in a basket. "I think this Christmas is going to be really memorable for everyone." The thing that struck me most was how they had managed to convince themselves that their plan was justified. I overheard fragments of conversations throughout the day, whispered exchanges in the hallway, knowing looks across the kitchen, little comments about teaching lessons and family accountability. They had built an entire narrative where they were the righteous defenders of family values, standing up against my supposed selfishness and irresponsibility. It was fascinating to watch people work so hard to justify their own cruelty. Around 3 o'clock, my grandmother arrived. At 90 years old, she was still sharp, though Carol had been increasingly treating her like she was incompetent. Watching my grandmother interact with Carol, thanking her for her help while Carol systematically robbed her, made my blood boil in a way that nothing else had. "Isabella, dear," my grandmother said, pulling me aside as I helped her with her coat. "I want you to know how proud I am of you. Starting over in a new city, building a career, making something of yourself. It takes real courage to chase your dreams." "Thank you, Grandma Rose," I said, genuinely moved. "Your support has meant everything to me." "Family is supposed to lift each other up," she continued, patting my hand, "not tear each other down. Remember that, sweetheart." The irony of her words, spoken just hours before her own family planned to publicly destroy me, was almost too much to bear. But it also strengthened my resolve. My grandmother deserved to know the truth about who was really taking advantage of her trust. As evening approached and dinner preparations reached their final stages, I noticed the conspirators becoming increasingly excited. They kept exchanging glances and making subtle comments about surprises and interesting conversations they were looking forward to. David had positioned his phone strategically to capture the dinner table, and Stephen had moved his manila folder to a spot where he could easily access it. The moment that really crystallized everything for me came about an hour before dinner. I was in the living room, adjusting the placement of gifts under the tree, when I overheard my mother and Carol talking in the kitchen. "Are you nervous about tonight?" Carol was asking. "Nervous? I am thrilled," my mother replied. "She has had this coming for years. Always thinking she is better than the rest of us with her fancy education and her big city job. Tonight she learns that actions have consequences. The look on her face is going to be priceless when Stephen starts reading those bank statements," Carol added with obvious glee. I almost wish we could charge admission. They both laughed, and I felt something settle into place inside my chest, a cold, steady determination that felt entirely different from anger or hurt. This was not about justice anymore. This was about showing them that underestimating people has consequences. I excused myself and went upstairs to my room, where I made a final review of my photo books. Every page was perfect. Every piece of evidence was documented and verified. Every cross-reference was accurate. I had created something that would withstand any attempt at denial or deflection. More importantly, I had realized something crucial about the timing. They were planning to spring their attack right after I shared news about my promotion, clearly intending to use my moment of happiness to amplify the humiliation. But that meant they would have to let me speak first. They would have to give me the floor, with everyone's attention focused on me, before they could launch their assault. That was going to be their fatal mistake. I had decided to modify my strategy slightly. Instead of waiting for them to attack and then responding with my gift, I was going to take control of the entire evening from the moment I stood up to speak. The photo books would become part of a larger presentation that would reframe the entire conversation before they even knew what was happening. I went back downstairs and quietly moved my wrapped gifts from under the tree to a position near my seat at the dinner table. To anyone observing, it would look like I was planning to hand out Christmas presents during dinner, a normal, sweet family tradition. They had no idea they were about to receive the most educational Christmas gifts of their lives. As my mother called everyone to gather for dinner, I watched the conspirators take their seats with barely concealed anticipation. Stephen placed his manila folder beside his plate. David made sure his phone was recording. Carol positioned herself directly across from me, clearly wanting a front-row seat for my humiliation. My Uncle Robert actually rubbed his hands together as he sat down, like he was preparing for a feast. In a way, he was. They all were. They just had not realized that they were going to be the main course. As my father began carving the turkey and my mother started her traditional Christmas blessing, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. In a few minutes, I was going to stand up and deliver what would probably be the most important speech of my life. Everything I had discovered, everything I had prepared, everything I had planned was about to come together in one perfect moment. They wanted drama at Christmas dinner? They were about to get more drama than they had ever bargained for. And the beautiful part was that they had set the entire thing up for me. Dinner began with the usual family chaos. Plates being passed, conversations overlapping, children fighting over who got the drumstick. But underneath the surface normalcy, I could feel the electric tension from my conspirators. They kept glancing at the clock, clearly counting down to their planned moment of attack. My father finished carving the turkey and took his seat at the head of the table. My mother raised her wine glass for her traditional Christmas toast, speaking about family bonds and gratitude while looking directly at me with what I now recognized as predatory anticipation. Before we eat, she announced, Isabella wanted to share some exciting news about her career. This was it. The moment they had all been waiting for. I could see Stephen's hand moving toward his manila folder. David adjusted his phone angle to get a better shot. Carol leaned forward in her chair like she was watching a gladiator match. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress and smiling warmly at everyone around the table. 23 family members and friends were gathered there, including several elderly relatives who had known me since childhood. These were the witnesses they had carefully assembled for my public humiliation. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice steady and clear. Family gatherings like this mean the world to me, especially during times of transition and growth. I paused, reaching for the stack of wrapped gifts I had positioned beside my chair. Before I share my career news, I want to give out some special Christmas gifts I have been working on. I created personalized photo albums for some of you, a celebration of our family's journey this year. The confusion on their faces was immediate and delicious. This was not part of their script. Stephen's hand froze halfway to his folder. Carol's confident smile began to waver. I started distributing the wrapped photo books, making sure to save my mother, Stephen, Carol, Robert, and David for last. These represent months of research and careful documentation, I continued conversationally. I wanted to capture the real story of our family's financial journey over the past year. My grandmother opened her book first. As she began flipping through the pages, her expression shifted from curiosity to shock to something approaching horror. She looked up at Carol, then at my mother, then at the documents in front of her. "Isabella," she said quietly, "what exactly am I looking at here?" "Those are bank statements showing systematic withdrawals from your accounts," Grandma rose. "And photographs documenting items that have disappeared from your house over the past year." Carol's section starts on page 12. The room went dead silent. Carol's face had gone completely white. "This is ridiculous," she stammered, but her voice cracked. "I have no idea what you are talking about." "Page 15 shows your home insurance inventory from last year," I continued calmly. "It is amazing how many of Grandma's antiques are now listed as your personal property. The Victorian lamp, the pearl brooch, the silver tea service, all documented with timestamps and photographic evidence." Other family members were opening their books now. Robert's wife gasped audibly as she read about the hidden bankruptcy. Stephen's face was turning red as people around him discovered his church embezzlement scheme. "This is insane," Stephen burst out, finally grabbing his manila folder. "We are here because Isabella stole money from Grandma Rose. $5,000. You mean this?" I pulled out a bank statement from my purse. "My loan from 6 months ago, which I have been repaying ahead of schedule. The loan that Carol suggested when I mentioned needing help with my apartment deposit." I looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. "Or did you mean the $37,000 that Stephen has embezzled from the church collection plate? Or the $75,000 my mother secretly borrowed against this house to invest in a pyramid scheme?" My mother shot to her feet. "How dare you? This is our home, our family, and you have no right." "I have every right to defend myself against a planned attack," I said firmly. "Especially when that attack is being launched by people whose own financial crimes make my family loan look like pocket change." David's girlfriend was reading over his shoulder, her mouth hanging open. "David, is this real? Did your family really plan to publicly humiliate her while hiding all this?" David could not even look at her. The phone he had positioned to film my downfall was still recording, capturing everything for posterity. "The most interesting part," I continued, "is how you convinced yourselves that this was about teaching me a lesson. But looking at the evidence, it seems like this was really about deflecting attention from your own crimes by creating a scapegoat." Robert finally found his voice. "Even if some of these accusations are true, that does not excuse what you did." "You are absolutely right," I agreed. "Taking money without permission is wrong. That is why I am so curious about why you thought you had the moral authority to judge me when you declared bankruptcy while hiding assets in your wife's name." The documentation starts on page 28. His wife turned to stare at him in shock. "Robert, you told me we paid off all our debts last year." "The beautiful thing about the truth," I said, sitting back down and cutting into my turkey as if nothing had happened, "is that it does not care about anyone's plans or expectations. It just exists." The room erupted into chaos. Multiple conversations were happening at once as family members confronted each other about the revelations in their books. Carol was trying to explain away the stolen antiques. Stephen was denying everything despite documentary evidence. My mother was frantically trying to control the narrative while Robert's marriage imploded in real time. My grandmother, bless her heart, tapped her water glass with her fork until she got everyone's attention. "I want to say something," she announced in her clear, strong voice. "I am 90 years old. I have seen a lot of family drama in my time, but I have never seen anything as ugly as planning to publicly humiliate a young woman who asked for help when she needed it." She looked directly at Carol. "Taking my things without asking is theft. Plain and simple." Then she turned to Stephen. "Stealing from the church is not just theft, it is a betrayal of faith." Finally, she looked at my mother. "And mortgaging the family home without your husband's knowledge while convincing relatives to invest in schemes you do not understand? That is not just financial irresponsibility. That is fraud." She reached over and took my hand. Isabella borrowed money from me and has been paying it back faithfully. More importantly, she had the courage tonight to expose the real thieves in this family. The silence that followed was deafening. My Uncle David was the first to speak. "I think we need to call this dinner over." "I think that is an excellent idea," I agreed, standing up again. "But before everyone leaves, I should probably mention that copies of all this documentation have been forwarded to the appropriate authorities. The church board, the bankruptcy court, and the police fraud division all have very thorough files now." And with that, I walked out of the dining room, leaving behind the most satisfying Christmas dinner of my life. The aftermath of Christmas dinner unfolded like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Within hours, the carefully constructed facades that my family members had built around their secret crimes began crumbling with spectacular efficiency. I spent Christmas night at a hotel downtown, having packed a bag before dinner in anticipation of needing a quick exit strategy. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from family members, but I let them all go to voicemail. I was not interested in damage control conversations or desperate attempts at manipulation. The truth was out there now, and they would have to deal with the consequences without my help. The first real fallout came the next morning when Stephen received a call from the church board. Apparently, several congregation members had received anonymous tips about financial irregularities, complete with detailed documentation. The church immediately suspended him from all financial responsibilities and announced they were conducting a full audit of the collection funds going back 2 years. By evening, Stephen was posting frantic messages on social media claiming he was being set up and falsely accused by a vindictive family member. The church board responded by posting a public statement that they had found significant discrepancies and were cooperating fully with law enforcement. Stephen deleted his social media accounts entirely by the end of the week. Carol's situation deteriorated even faster. My grandmother, armed with the photographic evidence from my research, filed a police report for theft. But the real blow came when other elderly relatives began coming forward with their own stories. Apparently, Carol had been running a systematic operation, taking advantage of multiple family members' trust and declining memory to slowly steal valuable items over several years. The district attorney's office was very interested in what they called elder abuse with intent to defraud. Carol hired a lawyer, but the evidence was overwhelming. Insurance records, photographs, witness statements, and Carol's own social media posts showing off her new acquisitions painted a picture that was impossible to defend. Robert's hidden bankruptcy became public knowledge when his wife filed for divorce and demanded a full forensic accounting of their assets. It turned out that Robert had been hiding the extent of their financial problems for over a year, secretly liquidating retirement accounts and running up credit card debt while maintaining the appearance of financial stability. His wife's divorce filing included accusations of financial fraud and demanded criminal prosecution for hiding marital assets. But the most spectacular collapse belonged to my mother. The pyramid scheme investigation that I had triggered by sending documentation to the state attorney general's office revealed that my mother was not just a victim, she was actively recruiting other family members to invest their savings. She had convinced my grandmother to put in $15,000, persuaded my elderly great-aunt to invest her Social Security money, and even talked my cousin's college fund into the scheme. When the state investigators raided the operation, they found that my mother had been receiving recruitment bonuses for every new investor she brought in. She was not just being scammed, she was part of the scam, profiting from defrauding her own relatives. The legal implications were serious, but the family implications were devastating. When my grandmother learned that my mother had specifically targeted elderly and vulnerable family members for financial exploitation, she cut off all contact immediately. My great-aunt, who had lost her entire life savings, retained a lawyer to explore civil remedies. The mortgage situation created additional problems. My father, who had genuinely known nothing about the $75,000 loan, found himself facing the choice between divorce or accepting financial responsibility for debts he never authorized. The house they had lived in for 30 years was now at risk of foreclosure. David's reaction was perhaps the most interesting. Initially, he tried to play the victim, claiming he had been pressured into participating in the planned ambush and that filming it was just supposed to be insurance in case things got out of hand. But as the legal consequences mounted for the other family members, he began to panic about his own potential liability. His girlfriend left him after Christmas, disgusted by both his participation in the planned humiliation and his attempts to minimize his role afterward. David began calling me obsessively, leaving voicemails that started with apologies and quickly devolved into desperate attempts to negotiate some kind of deal. "Isabella, you have to understand, I never wanted to hurt you," one message began. "Mom convinced us that you needed tough love. But this has gone too far. People are talking about prison time. You have to call off the dogs." I did not call him back. The broader family reaction was mixed, but largely supportive of my actions. Relatives who had not been part of the conspiracy were horrified to learn about the planned ambush and impressed by the thoroughness of my investigation. Several people reached out to apologize for not recognizing what was happening and to express support for my decision to expose the truth. My grandmother became my strongest ally. Despite being the primary victim of the theft and fraud schemes, she was furious about the planned Christmas attack. "They tried to destroy you to cover up their own crimes," she told me during one of our daily phone calls. "That is not just criminal, it is evil." She also provided crucial additional evidence for the ongoing investigations. Her memory might have been declining, but her record-keeping was meticulous. She had documentation going back years that helped prosecutors build stronger cases against Carol and my mother. The most satisfying moment came 2 weeks after Christmas when I received a call from the museum director. Word of my investigative skills and attention to detail had somehow reached him, and he wanted to discuss expanding my role to include work with the museum's provenance research team, investigating the ownership history and authenticity of artwork and artifacts. "Isabella," he said, "I understand you have some experience with financial forensics and document analysis. We have some challenging cases involving artwork with questionable provenance, and we could use someone with your particular skill set." It was a promotion with a substantial salary increase, working on exactly the kind of complex, detail-oriented investigations that I found fascinating. The irony was perfect. The research skills I had used to expose my family's crimes were now opening new professional opportunities. As January progressed, the legal machinery continued grinding forward. Stephen faced federal charges for embezzlement from a religious organization. Carol was indicted on multiple counts of elder abuse and theft. Robert was under investigation for bankruptcy fraud. My mother was facing both criminal charges for her role in the investment scheme and civil lawsuits from the family members she had defrauded. The house where I had grown up was listed for sale to pay off the secret mortgage. My parents' marriage was hanging by a thread. The extended family was split into factions, with most people supporting my actions, but some claiming I had gone too far by involving law enforcement. I felt no regret whatsoever. They had planned to destroy my reputation and relationships to cover up their own criminal behavior. Instead, their own actions had destroyed their lives while launching mine into an exciting new direction. Sometimes karma does not just come around, it comes around with compound interest. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office at the museum, surrounded by case files for artwork provenance investigations, when I received a text message that made me smile. It was from my grandmother. "Saw the news about Stephen's sentencing. 18 months in federal prison. Karma is efficient." The final legal outcomes had exceeded even my expectations. Stephen's church embezzlement conviction resulted in both prison time and restitution requirements that would follow him for years. Carol received 2 years in state prison for elder abuse, with additional civil judgments that forced her to liquidate assets to repay her victims. Robert's bankruptcy fraud case resulted in criminal fines and a ban from handling financial matters for his family. My mother's situation was the most complex and, in many ways, the most satisfying. Her involvement in the pyramid scheme resulted in criminal conspiracy charges, but the real consequences came from the civil lawsuits filed by family members she had defrauded. She lost everything: the house, her savings, her reputation in the community, and most of her relationships with extended family. The woman who had planned to publicly humiliate me for borrowing $5,000 from my grandmother was now facing financial ruin for stealing and defrauding hundreds of thousands of dollars from vulnerable relatives. The irony was so perfect it felt like cosmic justice. My father, who had genuinely been an innocent victim of my mother's financial schemes, filed for divorce and started the process of rebuilding his life. In an interesting turn of events, he and I began developing a relationship for the first time in years. Without my mother's influence, he was able to see the situation clearly and was genuinely appalled by what she had planned to do to me. "I knew your mother could be petty and jealous," he told me during one of our monthly coffee meetings. "But I never imagined she was capable of that level of calculated cruelty. I am so sorry, Isabella. You deserved better from all of us." The professional opportunities that emerged from the situation continued to surprise me. My work with the museum's provenance research team had caught the attention of federal investigators who specialized in art fraud and cultural property crimes. They offered me consulting work on complex cases involving stolen artwork and fraudulent documentation. It turned out that the same skills that had allowed me to uncover my family's financial crimes, attention to detail, ability to cross-reference multiple sources, talent for spotting inconsistencies in documentation, were exactly what law enforcement needed for high-level art crime investigations. Within 8 months, I was earning more than I had ever dreamed possible, working on fascinating cases that took me around the world, and building a reputation as one of the most thorough investigators in my field. My career had not just survived my family's attempted sabotage. It had flourished because of the skills I developed fighting back against them. The personal relationships that emerged from the situation were equally rewarding. My grandmother and I became closer than we had ever been. She moved into a beautiful assisted living facility where she could receive proper care while maintaining her independence, and we talked almost every day. She delighted in hearing about my cases and often provided insights that helped me think through complex problems. "You know what the difference is between you and them?" she asked me one afternoon. "You fought back with truth. They attacked with lies. Truth always wins in the end, but it takes courage to wield it." I also developed unexpected friendships with some of the relatives who had been victims of the family's financial crimes. My great-aunt, who had lost her Social Security money to the pyramid scheme, became a close ally and mentor. Despite being in her 80s, she had a sharp mind for financial matters and helped me understand some of the more complex aspects of the fraud schemes. Several cousins who had been peripherally aware that something was wrong but too intimidated to speak up reached out to apologize and rebuild relationships. We formed what we jokingly called our survivors support group, family members who had been manipulated or victimized by the same people who tried to destroy me. The most interesting development was with David. After months of legal proceedings and therapy, he finally took full responsibility for his role in the planned ambush. He wrote me a letter that was genuinely remorseful and insightful about how he had allowed resentment and family pressure to override his better judgment. "I was jealous of your success," he wrote. "Instead of dealing with my own insecurities, I let Mom convince me that tearing you down would somehow make me feel better about my failures. I was wrong, and I am sorry. You deserved support from your family, not sabotage." I eventually forgave him, though our relationship would never be the same. He had moved across the country and was working with a therapist to understand how he had been manipulated into participating in such cruel behavior. We exchanged occasional emails, but the trust was gone forever. The broader lesson that emerged from the experience was about the difference between biological family and chosen family. The people who had shared my DNA had been willing to destroy me to protect their own secrets and satisfy their own resentments. Meanwhile, colleagues, friends, and even some relatives who barely knew me had provided support, encouragement, and opportunities for growth. I learned that family loyalty should never be unconditional when it requires you to accept abuse or injustice. Real love does not demand that you stay silent about wrongdoing or accept blame for other people's crimes. The people who truly cared about me celebrated my success and supported me when I needed help. They did not try to tear me down to make themselves feel better. A year after that Christmas dinner, I was featured in a national magazine article about young professionals making innovative contributions to art crime investigation. The article mentioned my background in museum work, but nothing about the family situation that had launched my career in forensics. As I read the article, I thought about how different my life would be if I had never overheard that phone conversation. If I had walked into Christmas dinner unprepared, the planned humiliation might have succeeded in destroying my confidence and damaging my professional reputation. I might have spent years rebuilding from the emotional and social wreckage they intended to create. Instead, their attempt to tear me down had revealed their own criminal behavior, launched my career in an exciting new direction, strengthened my relationships with people who truly mattered, and taught me invaluable lessons about resilience and justice. Looking back, I was almost grateful for that phone conversation. Not because I enjoyed the pain of discovery or the chaos that followed, but because it forced me to discover strength I did not know I possessed and to build a life based on truth rather than toxic family dynamics. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for yourself? How do you handle situations where the people closest to you become your biggest obstacles? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and finding strength in difficult situations. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes the best thing you can do for toxic family members is show them the consequences of their own actions. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the truth might be difficult to wield, but it is the most powerful weapon you have against people who try to destroy you with lies and manipulation.